Wow. It has definitely been a while. Oh my gosh, we're going to see how many people actually decide to log on from our lovely little shelter-in-place quarantine zones. We got our first viewer. Hey, guys. Welcome to the new garage. I have yet to do a tour. I definitely need to do that. Lots of things have changed. Good, bad, learnings all the way. I've had a lot of questions on the channel over last year since I posted the first video with the SS Brewtech 2-barrel unit tank. And I kind of wanted to just kind of use the time of us being quarantined at home. My family is healthy, safe. We've kind of been bunkered down for 3 weeks, which has been good for keeping us safe, good for the brewery, which allows me to come out here, do some brewing and bottling and experiments, and then has also been really kind of good for going, hey, what are we doing about this? I see a comment kind of pop up every couple of days, and it just kind of is on my shoulders every single time going, oh man, I got to get more content out there. And I go about filming stuff, but having the time to sit down and edit it and post it has just been not one of the things on the radar, unfortunately. Especially with brewing and the bottle club and then my day job. And then a family on top of that with 2 kids, a 9-month-old now who's trying to stand and walk, and a 4-year-old who is very strong-willed, and yeah, lots to do. But yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I will repeat them and answer them the best I can. I have a couple light house cleaning duties tonight. Primarily, I've got to clean my heat exchanger. Just needs a good cleaning. And I can show a little trick that I've been doing on a nanoscale to accomplish a lot of my cleaning. So a good portion of my cleaning has to deal with heating water. As we're all finding out, it's a pretty big deal. Hot water is needed all the time. What I've done is, if you can see right down here, is I got the mash and boil a while back to just do some pilot batches, do some small scale stuff. And it sat on the counter for a while. And I thought to myself, oh gosh, got to do something with this. And I was like, okay, it can heat water pretty well. And precisely, maybe I could use it for some cleaning water. So fired it up, heated it, threw in some caustic, pumped it into a tank, started my CIP, and I was like, wow, this is actually quite brilliant. And then I had an epiphany. I was like, it's got a built-in pump. Wonder if I can just recirculate through my heat exchanger, through all of my lines, through my jockey box, through my cold room with the draft. I was like, this is great. So literally, I have purchased a wonderful mash and boil. It has been a workhorse in the brewery. And it is primarily my CIP / all-purpose cleaning device. Another couple updates that you might see around here. Let me see if I can just move this. Okay. Also got a 5-barrel. Over the last year when we moved to the new house because of the new kid, I had a few things that kind of went right with the brewery, and we decided to get a 5-barrel. I say we a lot, but it's me, myself, and I. 70% janitor, 10 to 15% brewer, and then the rest is sales and marketing. But yeah, so I went with a Craftmaster stainless 5-barrel. It's awesome. It's got a built-in CIP arm. You'll still see my original SS Brewtech 2-barrel back here. It's a champ. It's awesome. It rock solid. Now, a couple questions that I did find that I didn't answer in the first video was, okay, so you've got the small glycol chiller from SS Brewtech. You've got some high-tech floating stuff in there to tell SG, OG, temperature, all that kind of stuff. Where am I at right now? What kind of tests did I do? I found basically that it was all a lot of independent things that were not beneficial at my scale. Now, what does that mean? So my tilts were great. I could read them through there, but they weren't super accurate. It was good to take a reading from them to see how things were progressing, but I couldn't rely on them because I was shipping product out to customers. I needed to make sure 100% that the ABV was the ABV. And I just couldn't reliably do that with the tilts. But they worked. You could read them through the tanks. It was great. As far as the glycol chiller, I still have my super small original SS Brewtech. I think it was like 1/3 horsepower or whatnot. It actually chills both these tanks. 5-barrel and a 2-barrel. Now, a couple caveats. It can maintain temperatures, no problem. It can cold crash, no problem. It can't cold crash both at the same time, which is not a problem for me. I oftentimes am not cold crashing both of these, and we'll get into the business model shift in a little bit. But for the most part, it hasn't. I won't cold crash both. I'm usually fermenting in one, cold crashing in the other. But surprisingly, it works fantastic. I haven't had to upgrade that, although it's on the list at some point to get something a little bit more robust to crash things quicker, maintain things a little bit better in the summertime. But for the most part, I found it works great. I have it dialed at about 28 degrees, 25 degrees as far as the glycol tank. And then I switched over from doing a Raspberry Pi for controlling these to a Inkbird, just a simple Inkbird 110, 120 volt thing that actually is Wi-Fi controlled and allows me to just do it on my phone. It was just a lot less wires to hook up, and it worked great. Yes, I have a beer, and as we are in lovely quarantine, I'm supporting our local brewers around here and bringing stuff to the house. Yeah, it's interesting times. Let's see here. What else is new? Okay, so this wonderful thing right here is a white wine barrel that I converted into an open fermenter. Aha! Thank you. Love it. First question. Did you buy another pump for the new 5-barrel fermenter? And I'm going to interpret that as a CIP pump. And no, I do have a bigger, robust pump on my shopping list, but so far I haven't needed it. I'll show you what I have. So I have a chugger pump, a Chugger Max. It's this beast, and I actually got it with TC fittings, and it works great. I can CIP both of those just fine. Yes, CIP. So yeah, this thing works great for all of my CIP needs. I've used it on my 3-barrel hot side. I've used it on my 5-barrel cold side. It works fantastic. What part of the country? I am in Everett, Washington. All right. Feel free to ask lots of questions. I have a lot of stuff in here and happy to share knowledge. Back to the open fermenter. So it's a white wine barrel that I have converted into There we go. Video's back. A full open fermenter. So I started a bottle club a bit ago where I was experimenting with some open fermentation. And I wanted to do everything in oak. That would be fun. So I like the idea of open fermentation. I was also scared by it. And so I kind of gave it a whirl. I found some resources on Milk the Funk in terms of how to convert an existing wine barrel into an open fermenter. And here she is. She's done quite a few batches already. We've got quite a few more in the queue. And yeah, it's just kind of fun. A couple learnings I had to figure out with that was, well, it's not under pressure. How do I get beer from this to another tank? So that I had to get actually a diaphragm pump to do. So I just got a simple wine diaphragm pump that I didn't have too much oxygen pickup along the way. And I pumped that over to my barrel side, which is over there. And it's a complete mess right now, so we won't go over there. But there's tons of oak over there. And yeah, it's been a champ. Yeast propagation. Great question. Love that. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's talk yeast because I can geek out about that all day. So yes, I have stepped up my yeast propagation. There was a talk at the, I think it was the Washington Brewers Association. Who was doing it? I think it was Elliott Bay Brewing. Did a talk about kind of like a hillbilly style yeast propagator. So what I did to get the volumes that I'm at is I do a bunch of homebrew packs, or I'll pull some yeast off of the cone and save it. But if we go back here, so I got myself a Maelstrom from Northern Brewer. That thing, in conjunction with a 3 to 5 gallon glass carboy, and inline oxygen, sterilized oxygen. I pump that in there with a heat wrap, and I keep it at about 77 degrees with a 3 gallon small 1040 batch of beer, and I can get my cell count up to crush through a 5-barrel batch of an imperial stout in a matter of 2 days. Not actual fermentation of it, but I can get my cell count up high enough that I'll have enough yeast, basically. But basically, I pull off a bunch of yeast from my previous batches. I've got a house saison culture that I just keep using over and over again. I haven't seen too much deviation from it in terms of flavor profile, but it's awesome. The whole yeast setup, I had a bunch of glass carboys sitting around. I had a small oxygen thing. I basically just had to get a pump, an inline air cleaning thing, and heat wrap. No, I had the heat wrap, but once I got that going, it was great. I cranked through quite a bit of a small prop to a big prop in a matter of days. Yeah, it's been pretty fun. Couple other things. Yeah, so, here we go. Cell count is 100 billion cell. All right, so the question came in, yeast cell count at pitch. How big of a deal is it? If cell count is 100 billion cells, low, is it going to be the end of the beer? Okay. I'm not going to get too in the weeds with yeast. What I've found from my experience is if you have a really, really, really healthy culture, if you have good oxygenation, yeah, I can't talk tonight. Good oxygen levels in your wort with some decent nutrient that it can chew through, it handles it pretty well. If you can, there's lots of yeast calculators out there in terms of what you should probably use based off of your OG and your volume, and then your initial pitch. I've used several different step-up calculators in terms of trying to get how much yeast I will use or need. For all of my repitches, I basically just pull off and make sure it's healthy and then repitch. If that works, great. If I have to repitch or prop it up again, so be it. But from starting up, what I probably end up doing is I'll get like a 1 barrel pitch, or I'll get 6 to 12 homebrew packs of something from like Imperial Yeast, and then I'll throw those in to a 3-gallon carboy, and then kind of just take that and cross my fingers that there's enough. And so far there has been. I haven't had any issue with yeast chewing through stuff. I think yeast and our current malt modification has gotten to the point where the yeast is relatively happy. But yeah, we could get into a whole yeast live show, and then I'd want to prepare for that a little bit better. All right, how did you start marketing your own beer? Just doing footwork, pub to restaurant, and were restaurants, pubs wanting, or etc. warming to you? Yeah, I mean, you know what? When it came to actually distributing the first couple of kegs, it was nerve-wracking. It was going, okay, well, what do we do? And the nice part about Washington State is you can self-distribute. It hasn't always been like that, but it changed a few years ago. And so I got my agent's license with Washington State, and I took samples around to a bunch of craft beer bars and restaurants that I respected, that I liked what beer was on their menu, and ones that I thought would fit the type of beer that I brew. And I would say it was really well received. I got 10 to 15 accounts within a matter of a month, which was great. And it was more than I could really supply at the time. And we can get into talking about the actual business complexities and where I was at when I started and where I am now. We can get into that in a little bit. But I would say that, footwork. Hit them up, find out who the beer buyer is, drop off samples, make sure you meet the person that's going to drink your beer, shake their hand, be really friendly with them, because if they're going to buy your beer and they're going to taste your beer, they kind of want to put a face to a name. It's also really nice being the brewer, the owner, going into there versus a salesperson, especially at my scale. I don't have a salesperson. I don't have. Let's see here. What other questions? Bottles or cans? Why? Oh, awesome question. Okay, so when I started, I had the ambition of doing cans. It's very marketable. People are liking cans. It's kind of like it's cool, right? Cans are cool. But I started with kegs because I could control the oxygen levels between my fermenters and packaging. Those are great. Product came out the door exactly how I wanted it. Then I did a pilot run with some cans. I had some weird experience with that. I found that cans, while I had my own micro canning setup here, I also brought in a mobile canner, and found that you have to really, really control your supply chain. I found issues with some of my lids or my ends not seating correctly, and it was causing the beer to essentially escape, or the CO2 to escape. That wasn't awesome to me from a brewer and an owner of a business. And I ran into that experience quite a few times. So I steered away from cans at that point. I was like, okay, you know what? Based off of the volume that I do and the scale that I'm at, cans don't make sense. I can't, when I ran the numbers in terms of how much loss I was projecting on each batch, it didn't make sense. So I switched over to bottles primarily for more of the barrel stuff. It made more sense at the scale when I looked at 60 gallons of a beer, how many bottles that would be. It made a lot more sense. I could also control from fermentation to packaging exactly the O2 levels. I have 100% counter-pressure bottle filler, so there's no oxygen that touches that beer, which is great. Had a lot more control versus the canning was open head filling. You had to really, 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 really be consistent with your temperature and your CO2 values. So I hope that helped answer that. Okay, great question. All right, why 5-barrel? Why not 7? This is a silly answer, but the 7-barrel wouldn't fit in here. I was going to get a 7-barrel, but it would have literally been at the ceiling. So we got a 5-barrel. How do I ensure consistency? That's an interesting question. At my scale and where the business is currently at for me, I don't really worry about that too much. And primarily because I evolve most of my recipes. I'll start with something that I like. I will gather feedback, and I will make adjustments. It's not going to be the same batch every single time. There's going to be tons of variables along the way that make things a little bit differently. Hopefully for the better. Sometimes not, but I haven't run into that yet. Knock on wood. But yeah, definitely, I don't worry too much about consistency other than making sure that from a consistency standpoint that I don't ship bad product that I wouldn't drink myself. Filler, yes. So that is the Medusa counter pressure filler. It's awesome. It's a 4-head counter pressure filler. I have it currently in a standby mode. I've got a handful more things to fill recently. Let's see here. It did the most recent batch of my Forged in Oak membership bottle. I just released the first beer with that, and it was a beer called Escape. It was a open fermented farmhouse ale that was fermented 100% in oak and re-fermented on pink guava. That beer came out at about 6.8%. It's funky. It's not super tart other than the acid that you'll get from the guava, but I'm super happy with it. But yeah, so we filled up all the member bottles. Fun little thing about my scale when it comes to labels. And I'm planning on doing a talk about this pretty soon. So labels can get expensive really, really quick, especially if you're only doing a couple hundred bottles. They can cost as much as $1 per label, which then really cuts down on any kind of potential margin that you might have. Now we're getting into the business end of things. So I explored really what would be possible when it comes to small scale label stuff. And I was like, okay, well, you could make a bunch of generics, you could handwrite it. Well, my handwriting sucks. So I was like, all right, well, what can we do? Came across a 40-watt CO2 laser, this little blue thing right here, and I was like, oh, could that work? So then I started doing some research around that and thought, hey, that could work. So found a rotary attachment for this, meaning it'll actually rotate the bottle. And so I actually use a CO2 laser to go from my standard member label bottle, which doesn't have a lot on it, to the completed label. And if you look at it at an angle, it actually removes the label material so you can actually see the glass underneath. It's pretty fun. but it allows me to get a lot of labels at a fraction of what they would have cost for a small batch. So I just change out the design on the computer, and the laser does the rest. All right, we are at 10. Any other questions before I start hooking up some hoses? All right, what would you change from the beginning? Oh, in terms of your business and equipment. Great question. Okay. I would probably say a couple big things I realized along the way are don't be so quick to invest in capital. So I did the gradual scaling of things. But probably what I would have done at the beginning was done a couple pilot batches on my half barrel system that I had at the time, find something that I liked, and I probably should have done a contract brew. Primarily just to get a lot of production out there with somebody else's equipment, or done something where it was brewing on their system when they're not brewing it. Adjacent brewing, at least to get started. But I didn't. Got some more stainless steel, scaled a little bit. Another thought I had after going through all of this was I learned about Grundy tanks, and when it comes to kegs, that's another thing we can talk about. So all of my kegs are leased to own. So every month I pay like $80, and I have a handful of kegs, and at some point those will become mine. There's a thing called Grundy tanks, which are essentially big fermenters that you can also lease. They're stainless steel. They can hold pressure. Some of them are jacketed. They've got lots of options. So leasing would have probably been a better option at the beginning, to at least have the containers in-house, but not having to invest the thousands of dollars into the stainless up front. It would allow me to produce a lot more beer quicker, even if I would have contract brewed just wort from brewers. That's another thing from the beginning I would have probably done different, is see if somebody could just produce wort, and then I would have transported it in a IBC tote that you can actually get on Uline. Just a big tote, and brought that to my brewery and pumped it into a fermenter and then pitched my yeast. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I probably would have done differently from the beginning. But had I have not gone through the process that I did, I probably would not have learned those. I would also say that like the resources that I found along the way weren't easily discoverable for me at the beginning. I would also say that my business angle or business plan has evolved from the beginning. I was targeting a lot of hazy IPAs. I was targeting a lot of mainstream beers that were easily crushable, easily sellable. But it was really hard to compete when it came to the math. So big breweries can get hops, can have yeast. They can find ways to really minimize their production costs, whereas small breweries that are left to the spot market when it comes to hops and having to either prop up homebrew packs or don't have a lab to manage your yeast, you really find yourself the profit of each batch being really, really small, which really, really is tricky when it comes to a distribution-only model. Now, if it was retail tap sales, it would have been very, very different. Those are about 3x of what a distribution-only model looks like. But being a brewery in a garage and being licensed with the TTB as a production brewery only, I don't have that luxury, at least not yet. And we could go into business for quite a few hours. All right. Haven't heard of leasing fermenters. Cool. Yeah. Grundy tanks is what they're called. I could look it up. But quite a few different places lease those. All right. What scale did you start at when you first started selling? I was at a 1-barrel system, and I had 2 1-barrel fermenters and a 2-barrel fermenter. And those worked pretty well. I have a colleague, a fellow brewer that started also at a 1-barrel system, but he had 5 1-barrel fermenters, which just allowed him to just continue to brew, and every week he'd have a new batch in a new vessel, which was great. But yeah, 1-barrel is where I started. I'm at 3-barrel on the hot side, which I'm very happy with, especially where I'm at now. Any other questions? Okay, let me grab a hose. I'm gonna hook this thing up. Bear with me. Okay. 6 viewers. All right, now I've only seen questions from 1, 2, 3 different people, and we got 6 people looking. So if you have any questions, filling, laser, cold side, hot side, cleaning, best beer so far. Oh, that's a tricky one. It's probably really bad, but I'm really keen on the latest bottle release, primarily from a meticulous process standpoint, being that it was open fermented, then in a white wine barrel, then it aged in a red wine barrel for 8 weeks, and then re-fermented on pink guava for another 3 weeks, and then bottle conditioned, or not bottle conditioned, packaged in bottles. It's great. I really, really, really love that beer. If I was looking at some of my more original beers, I have a Hazy Days was pretty awesome, but it was a beer that I brewed with the Pink Boots blend of 2018, which was awesome. It had just every amazing hop in it, and it was just super crushable. But yeah, it covers the gamut. I like saisons. I like hazy IPAs. I love sours, which I'll be doing a lot of here. I have an imperial stout that's going into 2 oak barrels in the next couple of days. Let's see here. Homebrew hobby. What style do you sell the most of? Originally, it was a lot of hazy IPAs. They sell really easily, especially if they're done well. If they have an amazing nose, if they don't drop from their opaque visual perspective. They also sell really well if you don't drop the SRM to be darker than, say, hay or straw. But yeah, those all sell really, really well. But it's different target market that you're after for hazy IPAs versus saisons. Can you explain your open fermenter process? All right. What about possible contaminations with other yeast strains? Good questions. I love these questions. Okay. So open fermenter process, standard brew day, knockout through the heat exchanger, directly into the oak fermenter. And now we can talk about, I'll take a pause and we'll talk about sanitizing this or cleaning. So I do a hot water rinse at about 185. And then I do a full steam cycle. That's the other really, really, really cool thing that I found with my mash and boil is, so I got the fermenter lid, which is a perfect size for a barrel silicone gasket. Then I merge that to a TC fitting, and I hook it directly up to this guy. So then I pipe in hot steam for about an hour to 2 hours until the internal temperature is exactly at 185. Now I've killed a lot of the bad stuff in there that I don't want in there. Then I fill it up with nice wort, throw my yeast in there, and then I put a nice muslin cloth over the top just to keep any kind of like bugs or anything that I don't want in there. And then the really nice thing about fermentation in general is the fact that it produces CO2. If I have my level, lower than the lip, all it's going to do is continue to bubble CO2 as a nice little blanket over the top. So I don't really have a super huge concern when it comes to contamination. I haven't run across any issues with it as far as like my process with that. It's still a possibility that some rogue yeasts will get in there. I think my culture will evolve over time. I think managing any kind of lactobacillus or pediococcus can be done on your recipe a little bit, and then also on your cleaning measures. But that's about it. And then once that ferments I keep it in here about 3 to 4 days, and then I'll transfer it into another barrel. TC. I gotta find another triclover. Keep coming with questions. I'll be on for an hour tonight, so we're at 37 minutes. Basically what I'm doing right now, since there's no questions, is I installed a quick disconnect on my mash and boil, and then I'm going to hook up to a 90-degree TC fitting that'll hook up to my heat exchanger, and then I'm going to recirculate caustic through there to clean it. And the nice thing about that is I can set it and forget it. Is anyone else super bummed about the fact that we're all quarantined under these circumstances? And I heard the other day that Omega has ceased production. Bums me out to no end because they're such a good yeast provider. Yes, still a one-man brewery. It's primarily a hobby. I have a full-time job in the engineering field, and this is really my only hobby. But people can benefit from it, so cheers to that. All right. I promise a full tour one day when it's not a mess because of packaging and all the things. I love 185 degrees. Kills everything. Open. We got pressure. All right, let's see here. Do you plan on bringing more content, like maybe a brew day? Yes. I totally want to do a brew day. The hard part for me is the production aspect of the brew day. Being a sole brewer and video person and all that kind of stuff, it's really hard to film it while you're doing it. And then usually I have the kiddos that decide to pop their head in, and other things that are needed throughout the day. So I really struggle with doing like the high production quality brew days. But if I can find a way to execute a live stream, yes, I want to answer any questions, show the process. Let's bring it over here. All right. So this is what I was talking about. Brewer's Edge, mash and boil. Quick disconnect fitting is pumping caustic through my CPE heat exchanger there. Running through my soft pipes. So I didn't hard pipe everything yet. I want to, but it's all soft piped. And I can control all the valves to clean each individual segment. Yes, that's a rims tube, inline sight glass, so I can take a peek at that. This is the 3-barrel system. It works awesome for me, as lately I've been doing a lot more barrel stuff, and the open fermenter is 2-barrel, so brewing a 2-barrel batch is very easy. I do have an Imperial Stout in my 5-barrel currently. That's going to be split between a bourbon barrel and a rye barrel. That'll be pretty fun. This is the hop freezer. It's full of hops. Yeah, CPE is my heat exchanger. It's great quality. They're a Canadian company. I'm not in Canada, but I like them as a company. Let's see here. What else? What else have we got? But yes, I want to bring more content. I primarily just want to answer anyone's questions because I had so many questions along the way, and it was a struggle to find the answers, and I really just had to try it. Are you having earnings yet, or are you still growing? I would say, in a nutshell, we're still growing. But it's kind of by design right now. The main goal of the business for the first couple of years was to invest in capital. That was the original structure. Was, okay, how do we make money to purchase things, capital expenses like big, huge fermenters for the brewery? Because I have no overhead, I have no lease, whatnot. It was by design to try to get as much equipment paid for, so that way, if we were to pull the trigger, and I say we in terms of like my family, like it's a family business. If we wanted to actually start a brewery and have a location, a commercial location, I wanted to be able to just lift and shift. I didn't want to have to also think about bigger equipment, more stuff right off the gate. So that was really kind of how it was. Had I have done things differently and done more of a lease structure, or done 100% barrel stuff and know my barrel stuff right off the bat, it might have been a little differently. We might have been in the profit sector of things. But I would also say that like how my brain works is it's very experimental. I like to try things. I like to have hands-on learning. and I have no problem with experimentation. So I probably wouldn't have done anything differently in retrospect. But I will say, as a brewer, some of my favorite things are the smallest dollar value in this brewery. And I will say, some of the biggest things for me is that mash and boil has been my saving grace when it comes to cleaning. These quick disconnects have been amazing when it comes to CO2 and oxygen. And I would say the laser etcher has also been great for not only the labels, but I also get to use it for, I'm working on bottle openers from old wine barrels. And I did all of our members' glasses with it. Let me see, grab one of those. So all that's etched in glass, which is awesome. It's just great to have a tool like that can produce small quantity items that a brewery like me can sell. All right, let's see here. What do we got? I have my first rims tube coming from Brewers Hardware. Yes, that's great. Rims are great. I haven't had any issues in terms of like scorching, but I also run my work through it pretty fast. A couple things to be considered is if you get a stuck sparge, it can scorch pretty quickly. So just be cautious of that. Know how your flow rate is coming out. Monitor that if you need to make sure that you add in rice hulls to thin it out or decrease your crush. Just be mindful of that. This is the one thing with rims tubes is you have work passing over a heating element. You want to make sure that flow goes through. I know this live stream was so last minute. And no one on this channel has actually seen me in about a year. So I'm so sorry. But if you follow me on Instagram, if you follow Lost Bear Brews, anyone that has pinged me on there, I have answered within less than a day of any questions you got. Let's see here. A couple of the questions that I can remember from the channel. Gravity readings. So I was originally with tilts, was also using a hydrometer to cross-reference, which ultimately resorted to me just using a hydrometer. I then went to a digital Plato by Han. So I use that now. So I only need a couple drops of that, of the wort to get my Plato readings, and I kind of go from there. What else do we got? Other questions? I think there was a cold room question on there as well. So my cold room is built 100% with a CoolBot and a used window air conditioning unit that I found on Craigslist. Built it all out of 2x4s and rock wool insulation from Home Depot, and then like the white foam insulation from Home Depot. Built the whole thing for like a couple $100. Few more than that, but 4 foot by 8 foot. It's been awesome. I moved it from one location to the next when we moved the houses. It's just been a rock star. And I have the CoolBot Pro, which allows me to log in from my phone, makes changes, monitor that kind of stuff. It tells me if it gets warm, so I can have somebody swing by. Mobius. So let's see here. Any suggestion? Okay, so I just want to make sure that, like, did I cover that in terms of the rims tube? Just making sure that you have a decent flow. so that way you don't have scorching. But rinse tubes are great. The nice thing with the 3-barrel that I have, it's from Stout Tanks down in Oregon. I got an insulated mash tun, so it actually my loss in terms of temperature on that volume is very minimal. So it barely fires up. But the nice thing that I use it for is I got rid of my instant hot water tank in this house for now. But I preheat my mash water in there the night before. Covered. Cool. Love that. What else? One big learning I found is some of the SS Brewtech tanks in terms of their sample valves. Let me see if I have one. Stand by. No, I don't. So the ones that they ship with, at least the 1 barrels or the 15 gallon or half barrels, are a lever type sample valve. And what I've found is sometimes they can develop micro scratches in there, or they can't seat properly, and which ultimately ends up looking like they're leaking. And what that'll ultimately end up doing is it's oxygen exposure and it's bacteria exposure to your beer. So it can totally mess with it. So what I've made sure of is right after that day, I talked to a couple of the brewer friends of mine, is switching all to these wonderful little diaphragm ones. These ones are great. They're a little bit more expensive, but you won't have the issues with the internal components having breaking down and contaminating your beer. Because I had to throw a 2-barrel batch out one day, and that wasn't very fun. All right, let's see here. Problems with business and equipment. Can you clarify that one a little bit more? Let me see if I can interpret it, but if you can help me clarify, it would be great. Problems with business and equipment. Yeah, need a little bit more on that one. Let me cover the next one here. Brewed what will be a chocolate stout today. Nice. Forgot to add the lactose to the boil. May have enjoyed a couple of my black rye IPA. No problem. That happens. So I threw it in the fermenter. It should be fine. I mean, it's an adjunct. If you don't get too much of the lactose pickup by throwing it in the fermenter, just consider it. You just didn't get everything incorporated. Also thinking of adding a pound of candy canes after primary. Should I throw in an extra packet of yeast during secondary? It depends on your yeast strain. You could also just throw it in primary. Think of primary and secondary as just stages of your fermentation. If your yeast is healthy, active, and happy, throw it in. Secondary, traditionally in the homebrew world, was more towards the clarification aspect, meaning trying to remove the initial trub and the yeast from the bottom to help clarify your beer, make sure that you don't have any kind of weird off flavors. When it comes to pro brewer level, like my beer doesn't leave the tank other than my oak stuff. It moves a lot, but when it's in traditional stainless stuff, I just what's called drop the cone. I'll pull my yeast off and then it just stays in there. But I wouldn't be adding in any kind of additional sugars at that point. So I'd say, you know what, if you want to add it in, if that's something that you want to do for your beer, go for it. Drop it in now, especially if it's active. The yeast is healthy. Okay. Carbonation process. Yes, that's a good one. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk specifically about forced carbonation or pressure carbonation in the unit tanks. And and we will go right over here. Okay. So when it comes to my process in carbonation, I do one thing and one thing only. I will use my lovely quick disconnects, not on that guy, but I will hook it up to my carbonation stone. Okay. I will set my PSI on my CO2 tank at around 15 to 18, depending. And I will open this guy up at only about a quarter of a way. But first and foremost, my temperature needs to be as cold as I can get it. If it's at about 33, 32, 34, like within that range, I want to get it as cold as I possibly can. But then I only crack it about a quarter. Don't open it full tilt, because the micro bubbles that are going to come out will not absorb into the liquid as best as they can. But yeah, so open that up a quarter. I found another method where people will set their readings at 15 PSI. They will open it up quarter to a third, and then they will open up their blow off just a little tiny bit. And really what they're trying to do is just to get the CO2 to absorb into the liquid at that temperature range. But my process is pretty straightforward. I put this thing at 18, sometimes 20, open that thing up to a quarter. I come back a few hours later. I can pretty much carbonate in a day. Okay. Let me know if that doesn't cover it, or if you have any follow-ups. But my biggest learning from that is don't open it completely. You will not get the carbonation values that you think you're going to get. Okay. Another yeast question. Top cropping versus yeast cake for future reuse. Yes. Okay. I love yeast questions. Open fermenter, top crop. Big guys, drop the cone. But you got to find a yeast strain that works with that. So all my barrel stuff, it's a mix. Sometimes I can't top crop. Sometimes I have to wait till I transfer and then do a distilled water rinse of the inside, and I'll save that. Let's see here. Got a grandfather conical, actually. Nice. Cool. You know what's funny is, like, when I first started homebrewing, it was the little tiny homebrew kit that you get with like a plastic carboy, glass carboy, an extract kit, and a 5-gallon like stainless steel pot, which I think I still have up in the storage area. But like now, it's like you can get a mash bill for a couple $100. I would have killed for that at the beginning. Bottle condition. Yes, that is on my radar. I want to do some bottle conditioning stuff. Kind of working with a couple of breweries to hone in on a process that I want to do. A lot of breweries do them differently. Some people will transfer their beer to the big tank, add in their additional sugars, and then package that same day. Other ones will add it, let it build up a few bars of CO2, do it under counter pressure. Some people will just do it in an open container, go straight from a barrel. It varies. I don't have a lot of details on bottle conditioning for you right now, but it's on top of my mind because I want to do a whole series on honey. Heat exchanger cleaning. It used to be a huge pain because before I had everything, I'd say soft piped, I'd have to take things apart. Grain storage. Oh, another fun thing at this scale, which deems its whole own time, is I actually built a grain elevator from my mill. So I can actually lift all the grain that I mill. And it came out of a necessity. My back was just going, hey, if you're lifting a couple 100 pounds of grain a day or every week, it's just not sustainable for me. But yeah, so I hard piped or soft piped all of my stuff, which allows me to close off all the individual valves and create sub loops to actually clean stuff independently. And so that, in conjunction with the small little pump from the mash and boil, has just been a lifesaver. So I don't have to take things apart as frequently, anyways. All right. Upgraded to the claw hammer 120. Nice. Yep. Great customer service. Yeah, they seem like a really good company. I haven't used any of their stuff, but looks pretty cool. 2 green feather conicals. Invested in a Delta Brewing. Oh, haven't heard of that yet. Okay, we're at an hour. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to finish this cleaning cycle. But if anyone has any questions, like, don't hesitate to hit me up on Instagram. I try to answer them as quickly as I can, given the day job and the family. But it's usually within a couple hours or a day. Yeah, just follow us. Follow me on Lost Bear Brews on Instagram, or hit me up on the website, email, and I'll get back to you with any questions. Thanks for everyone for watching tonight. I'm sorry it's been so long since I've been doing this. I'm going to try to do a lot more. But yeah, any questions, happy to answer. The more tricky ones primarily revolve around the actual like licensing and legality, which I'm not a lawyer. I can only speak to my experience on how I got licensed. And we can have a chat about that. But yeah, anywho, tech stuff, very easy for me. All right, everybody, have a good night.